Edward Carlyle was a self-made millionaire living a life of luxury and power. But when Victoria Hale, the woman he loved, couldn't bear their breakup, everything spiraled out of control. What started as heartbreak turned deadly, dragging Edward into a nightmare where trust was shattered, secrets festered, and the ultimate price had to be paid. This is the story of how obsession destroyed a fortune and claimed a life. Edward Carlyle's life seemed like a dream made real. A sprawling penthouse overlooking the city skyline, luxury cars lining his private garage, and a calendar packed with invitations to the most exclusive events. To the public, Edward was the embodiment of success and charm, a self-made millionaire whose business empire spanned from real estate to technology startups. But behind the glittering image, his personal life was far more complicated than anyone could imagine. The man who threw dazzling parties and dazzled high society with his magnetic personality was struggling with one of the hardest challenges of his life: a recent breakup with Victoria Hale, a woman who had been more than just a girlfriend. Victoria was a force of nature herself, known for her striking beauty and intense emotions. She came from a wealthy family, but was fiercely independent, with a streak of stubbornness that sometimes clashed with Edward's calculated and controlled world. Together, they had seemed like a perfect match, two powerful figures entwined in a whirlwind romance that captivated many. Yet, as with many passionate relationships, the connection between Edward and Victoria was turbulent. Their fights were loud, their make-up moments equally dramatic. But underneath it all was a deep attachment that neither of them could easily sever. When Edward finally decided to end things, it wasn't just a breakup. It felt like a fracture of something vital to both their lives. Edward told close friends he needed space to focus on his growing business ventures, but Victoria saw it differently. To her, the end was devastating, a cruel betrayal she refused to accept. Victoria's world began to unravel quickly after the split. She stopped attending social events. Her once bright demeanor faded into something darker. Friends noticed her withdrawing from her usual circles and became concerned by the intensity of her calls to Edward, which grew more frequent and desperate as days passed. She didn't just want closure, she wanted him back, no matter the cost. It was a silent warning sign of the storm to come. Meanwhile, Edward tried to move forward, throwing himself into work and distancing himself from the drama. But the end of their relationship left an unexpected ripple effect. The subtle tension that had always lingered beneath Edward's polished exterior was now impossible to ignore. He started noticing small, unsettling things. A shadow outside. His window late at night. A note slipped under his door that simply read, "You can't run." At first he thought it was a prank, but the feeling of being watched became harder to shake. Despite hiring security, Edward's sense of safety diminished with each passing day. The police were called after a series of incidents. His car found, scratched with threatening words, mysterious packages left at his office, and strangers spotted near his private residence. The investigators tried to piece together the puzzle, but no solid leads emerged. Everyone suspected Victoria, yet she was always just one step ahead, careful not to leave traces that could directly link her to these acts. Her love had turned obsessive, but she was clever enough to hide the full extent of her desperation. Friends and acquaintances whispered about Victoria's state of mind, describing her as unrecognizable, trapped between heartbreak and something darker. She had gone from a confident, vibrant woman to someone consumed by pain and fixation. Yet no one could have predicted the dangerous path she was about to take. Behind closed doors, Victoria was plotting ways to reclaim what she believed was hers by right, Edward's attention, his life, his heart. At the same time, Edward's life was more vulnerable than ever. The city that once seemed so familiar and full of opportunities now felt like a maze of threats and shadows. He knew he was being pulled into a game with stakes higher than he imagined. What started as a personal heartbreak was becoming something far more sinister, with consequences that neither Edward nor Victoria could foresee. In the world of wealth and influence, appearances often mask hidden truths, and Edward's glittering life was no exception. The facade of control was cracking, revealing the dangerous obsession and broken hearts that lay beneath. The end of their relationship was only the beginning, a spark that would ignite a chain of events leading to betrayal, danger, and ultimately, tragedy. The millionaire's fortune and charm could not protect him from the dark storm unleashed by a woman who simply couldn't bear to lose him. After the breakup, Edward Carlyle's world began to feel less secure than ever before. The once serene and controlled environment of his life started to unravel, piece by piece. Strange events crept into his daily routine, casting shadows over what had been a carefully managed existence. It was as if an unseen force was closing in, threatening to disrupt everything he had built. The first sign came in a small but unsettling way. His prized luxury car, a rare limited edition model, was found vandalized one morning in his private garage. The windows were smashed, and the bodywork was scratched with words that sent a chill down Edward's spine. "You belong to me." No one saw anyone leave the scene, and the security cameras outside had conveniently malfunctioned that night. The police were called, but the case quickly grew cold. Edward suspected Victoria immediately, but without evidence, it was nothing more than a dark suspicion. As the days passed, the harassment escalated. Mysterious notes appeared at his office desk, unsigned but unmistakably personal, filled with cryptic messages that hinted at obsession and warning. Edward's phone rang late at night with silent calls, and unmarked cars seemed to follow him on occasion. His private security detail was doubled, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. Edward began to question who could be behind these acts, and whether it was truly just Victoria or someone else playing a deadly game. Behind the scenes, Victoria's presence was more elusive than ever. She was careful, almost calculating, knowing when to appear and when to vanish like a ghost. Investigators later found evidence that she had hacked into Edward's digital accounts. Emails, calendars, private messages. Victoria had access to all of it. She used this information not just to stalk, but to manipulate, to stay one step ahead of anyone trying to intervene. Her obsession had turned into a dangerous weapon, and it seemed no boundary was safe from her reach. Yet Victoria's involvement wasn't straightforward. Friends who tried to help her during this dark time found her both fragile and fiercely protective of her privacy. She hid her pain behind an intense calmness that unnerved those close to her. Despite her volatile emotions, she remained a mystery to those trying to understand her actions. Was she spiraling out of control, or was something else driving her? Then came the incident that shocked everyone. Edward owned a countryside villa, a place meant for quiet retreats away from the city's glare. One night a fire broke out, engulfing much of the property in flames. The cause was quickly ruled suspicious by fire investigators. Arson seemed the likely culprit. Fortunately, Edward wasn't there at the time, but the damage was devastating. For Edward, the fire was more than a loss of property. It was a clear message. Someone wanted to hurt him, and they weren't afraid to destroy everything in their path. The police focused their suspicion on Victoria, as she had the strongest motive, but the evidence was thin, and no concrete proof tied her to the crime. There were rumors of another player, someone from Edward's business world who might benefit from his downfall. Edward had made enemies in his rise to power, and some of them had reasons to wish him harm. The line between personal and professional danger blurred in ways no one expected. Edward's life became a constant balancing act between public appearances and private fears. He held meetings in well-guarded offices but checked every corner of his home multiple times a day. Paranoia settled in like a shadow he couldn't shake. Security experts advised him to stay away from predictable routines. But even then, the feeling that someone was always watching remained. The trail of shadows surrounding Edward grew longer and darker. Every clue seemed to lead to dead ends or more questions. The investigators struggled to untangle the twisted web of obsession, betrayal, and rivalry. Victoria's obsession was undeniable, but was she acting alone? Or was she just a pawn in a bigger, more dangerous game. In the midst of all this, Edward remained a man desperate to reclaim control over his life. But the more he tried, the more entangled he became in a mystery that threatened to consume him. The sparkling millionaire, who once commanded the admiration of thousands, was now a man trapped in a nightmare of his own making. The next chapter of his life would reveal that the danger was far greater than anyone had imagined, and that the price of love lost could be deadly indeed. The atmosphere around Edward Carlyle's life became increasingly tense as the days passed. Despite his efforts to stay ahead of the threats, fate took a darker turn, one that no amount of wealth or security could prevent. The night Edward was found dead in his penthouse shocked everyone who knew him, shattering the illusion of control and safety he had once maintained so carefully. It was a cold evening when Edward's lifeless body was discovered. The scene was chilling in its silence and mystery. A single gunshot wound to the chest was the immediate cause of death, but the details surrounding his death did not add up. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle, leaving investigators puzzled. The security cameras that once kept watch had been mysteriously disabled just hours before Edward was killed, removing what should have been the most crucial evidence, the key. Initial assumption was that Edward's death was a murder, a personal crime fueled by passion or revenge. Victoria Hale, given her recent obsession and history with Edward, quickly became the prime suspect. The narrative seemed straightforward. A scorned woman driven beyond reason, exacting a deadly revenge on the man who had left her. But as the investigation deepened, cracks began to show in this theory. Forensic experts uncovered something startling during their examination: traces of poison in Edward's system. The poison had entered his body hours before the gunshot wound, meaning the shooting was not the actual cause of death, but part of a carefully staged scene. This revelation flipped the case upside down. Edward hadn't simply been shot. He had been slowly poisoned, and someone had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks. The discovery of poison led investigators to re-examine every detail of Edward's last days. It became clear that the murder was not a crime of passion, but a cold, calculated act. Someone with detailed knowledge of Edward's routines and vulnerabilities had planned the attack. This new evidence raised questions about who had the means and motive to carry out such a precise and chilling plot. Edward's tangled business affairs came under scrutiny. Behind his public success was a fierce rivalry with several powerful figures in the corporate world. Competitors who had lost millions due to Edward's aggressive strategies now appeared as possible suspects. Some of these rivals had everything to gain from Edward's sudden demise. But who among them was willing to kill? Amid the growing list of suspects, Victoria's role became increasingly complex. She was clearly unstable, but there was no direct evidence tying her to the murder, weapon or the poison. Moreover, new witness accounts suggested that someone else had been lurking near Edward's penthouse around the time of his death, someone who didn't fit Victoria's profile. This person had skillfully disabled the security system, suggesting professional involvement. The investigation revealed a web of deceit, betrayal, and manipulation that went far beyond a broken relationship. Edward had trusted many in his life, but it seemed one of those people had betrayed him most deeply. The trusted confidant, the business partner he counted on, suddenly emerged as a key figure. Marcus Lorne, Edward's longtime partner and friend, became a person of interest when financial records showed suspicious activity and unexplained withdrawals from their joint accounts. Marcus had motive and opportunity. Rumors of embezzlement had surfaced months before Edward's death, and the business partner had been desperate to keep his secret hidden. When Edward decided to investigate the missing funds, Marcus panicked and took a deadly course of action. He meticulously planned the poisoning, knowing it would weaken Edward before the gunshot would complete the deception. The final piece of the puzzle came when investigators uncovered evidence that Marcus had used Victoria's obsession against her. He manipulated her emotions, feeding her false hope and anger, distracting both Edward and the police. Victoria, caught in the middle, became an unwitting pawn in Marcus's deadly game. Edward Carlyle's death was a tragedy born from heartbreak, greed, and betrayal. The millionaire who seemed untouchable was brought down not just by a desperate woman's pain, but by the cold ambition of a trusted friend. The shocking twists in the case revealed that sometimes the greatest danger lies not in enemies outside, but in those closest to us. The truth behind Edward's death changed everything, shattering illusions and leaving a chilling reminder of the deadly price that obsession and betrayal can demand. The investigation into Edward Carlyle's death stretched on for months, peeling back layers of deception that few had expected. What initially seemed like a straightforward case, a heartbroken woman turned violent, transformed into a complex story of manipulation, greed, and betrayal. The truth, when it finally emerged, revealed just how deep the darkness surrounding Edward's life truly ran. Victoria Hale's arrest for stalking and cyber intrusion was a turning point, but it was clear early on that she wasn't the killer. Though her obsession with Edward was undeniable, the evidence didn't link her directly to the murder. Instead, she was a tragic figure caught in the crossfire, her mind tangled in heartbreak and manipulation. As the investigation pressed forward, it became clear that someone else had orchestrated the murder, with chilling precision. The breakthrough came when financial investigators uncovered irregularities linked to Marcus Lorne, Edward's trusted business partner. Marcus had been siphoning money from their joint ventures for months, covering his tracks with forged documents and misleading transactions. His carefully constructed facade of loyalty had fooled everyone, including Edward. But when Edward began to suspect fraud, Marcus's desperation grew. The murder was not just about money, it was about survival. Marcus had planned Edward's death with cold calculation. He exploited Victoria's instability as the perfect cover, knowing that police attention would naturally focus on her volatile behavior. He fed Victoria false information through anonymous messages, deepening her obsession and distracting her from the real threat. It was a ruthless move that demonstrated how far Marcus was willing to go to protect himself. The evidence against Marcus mounted quickly once detectives connected the dots. Surveillance footage showed him near Edward's penthouse on the night of the murder, and forensic analysis confirmed traces of the poison in items linked to Marcus's personal effects. His attempts to disable security cameras were also exposed as part of the plot to create confusion and mislead investigators. When confronted with the evidence, Marcus tried to deny involvement, but the weight of proof was overwhelming. His betrayal was not just financial, but deeply personal, a friend who had exploited Edward's trust to carry out the ultimate crime. The betrayal cut even deeper because Marcus had been one of the few people Edward believed would never hurt him. Victoria's story was one of heartbreak and manipulation. She had been drawn into a nightmare, used as a pawn in a deadly game she could neither control nor escape. Her obsession, fueled by love and loss, was twisted by Marcus into a weapon to hide the truth. Though she was deeply troubled, Victoria's role in the murder was that of an innocent victim trapped in a web of deceit. As the case closed, the community was left to grapple with the tragic consequences of unchecked obsession and greed. Edward's death was a stark reminder that wealth and power offer no immunity from the darker sides of human nature. Sometimes the most dangerous threats come not from strangers, but from those closest to us, those who know our secrets and weaknesses. The story of Edward Carlyle, Victoria Hale, and Marcus Lorne serves as a chilling cautionary tale. It reveals how fragile trust can be when shattered by betrayal, and how love turned toxic can spiral into tragedy. The millionaire's glittering life, marked by ambition and success, ended in a web of lies that destroyed everything he had fought to protect. Though justice was served, the scars left behind were deep and lasting. Victoria would forever carry the weight of a broken heart and a manipulated mind, while Marcus's downfall served as a warning about the cost of greed. And for those who knew Edward, the painful truth was that sometimes the ultimate price is paid not just in money or power, but in lives lost to the darkness lurking beneath the surface. The case remains a haunting reminder that appearances can deceive, and the most dangerous stories are often those hidden behind closed doors, where love, betrayal, and obsession collide with deadly consequences.